Hey guys, what's up? It's Maya and I am back with another video. So this week I want to go over kind of the whole interview process and everything you might need to know once you guys get to the stage of applying to positions and the whole interview and questions to ask, questions you might come across. Because not too long ago I was just right there with you guys and I was also applying for jobs, and I know how stressful it can be, and I honestly wasn't sure what kind of questions I was going to be asked. So just talking from experience, I just want to show you guys kind of more or less what I went through when it was kind of interviewing and everything. So yeah, it might differ from, actually going into being a virtual interview. Personally, I really like the whole virtual interview just because I get super nervous when it comes to interviews. So this was perfect for me, and I feel like I did a really good job at representing who I am and who I am as a new grad nurse. But let's go ahead and get into it. I wrote down a few notes, and so that way I don't lose track of what I'm saying. Starting out, I applied to every single job possible. I applied to both hospitals in my city that were hiring at the time, and the positions that I applied for were new grad positions. On the hospital websites, it either said new grad position or new grads accepted, and so those are the ones I picked just because I felt like I had a better chance at getting those interviews rather than a normal nurse job. It took about 1 week after I filled out the applications to actually start getting callbacks. The interviews that I got were on an ortho floor, 2 med-surg floors, a surgical floor, and then I got an interview at a jail. Since they were all virtual interviews, it was kind of nice because I was able to kind of have a piece of paper next to my computer, and it had some stuff that I can just kind of it had words basically. So that way I remembered, oh, okay, I need to say this. As for the actual interviews, they lasted about 30 to 45 minutes. And before I got an interview with an actual hiring manager, I went through a screening. So basically that was when the HR person basically calls you and asks you a bunch of questions, just basically like, oh, tell me about yourself, where'd you go to school, do you already have your license, and stuff like that, just to make sure that you are actually qualified for the position. And then if you are qualified, then you are able to move on to the next step. So once that's happened, they go ahead and forward your resume and everything to the hiring manager on the floor, and then they kind of schedule an appointment with you to do the interview. I wrote down some of the questions that I actually was asked, and I think they're all very similar, if not just worded a little differently when it comes to what questions they ask on the interview. So they usually start out with, telling you a little bit about the floor, what their patient load is, what kind of things are their specialty. Like for instance, a med-surg floor might be a med-surg floor, but they're specialized in strokes or specialized in cardiac patients or something like that. Then they're gonna ask you a little bit like, oh, tell me about yourself. What's your work history? What are you looking for on a floor? And basically with those questions, it's really good to kind of, mention I'm a new grad nurse, and I want to be on a floor that is going to allow me to learn, and a floor that is also going to be able to teach me the things that I need to be taught in order to be a great and successful nurse. And then you can kind of say what you do for work if you have any experience at all, or if you don't. Also, I kind of said I have a serving background. I was a server for many years, and I think a lot of the skills that I've had in serving kind of transfer over to nursing because there's a lot of communication skills that I have. Also, just working with people on a day-to-day basis, I have to have certain things that I can do. I need to be able to work at a fast enough pace and be able to juggle many things at once. So kind of telling them oh, I might not have any experience in the actual healthcare field. I do have all these other past experiences that kind of relate over is really important. One of the questions I was asked was, it's a work day and not a whole lot is going on. What do you do when it's slow? So when I answered this question, I kind of went off of serving and how you should restock things and ask your other coworkers if they need help. I think teamwork is a really big thing when it comes to any job, but also knowing that even though you're not busy, someone else might be. So just kind of incorporating that teamwork in there kind of shows that you're not only good at working with yourself but with others. What do you do if you have a overly demanding patient? And you can also just pull from real experiences with this question. I said, you know, like in hospitality or in serving, you know, you have a lot of people saying, oh, I didn't want this, or I need something specifically this way. With overly demanding patients like that, it's just really important to actively listen to what they're saying and make sure that you're doing what you can to kind of accommodate for them, but also being aware of your own time management and making sure that, you know, you're running their time, like you're running the time and they're not running you, if that makes sense. Example of workload with short staff. So with this question, I remember saying something along the lines of like, don't get myself overworked, or I don't overwhelm myself with the fact that like knowing we're short staffed, because that'll just add to the stress of already being short staffed in the beginning anyways. I think in this question, they want to know that you're going to put priorities first. So you want to put like the highest priority first. List the time in your clinical when there was a lot of pressure, and how did you react? This one, I remember a time in clinical when I had a patient that everything that was going on with him was kind of going downhill. So I remember it was under a lot of pressure because I was kind of alone. It's kind of towards the end of my nursing school career. And so we were kind of on our own, and I just remember being kind of like, okay, I need to work through the steps that I know, using my resources and, you know, yeah, just using my resources. And when you're under a lot of pressure, to stay concentrated. So another question I was asked was, tell us about a time when you almost made a mistake but caught it before it happened. So this question is kind of just making sure that you're gonna recheck your steps. I think a big one that they're looking for is kind of like the medication administration process. There's like the 5 steps to administering medications, and it's like right patient, right dose, right time, all that stuff. So I think they're trying to see if you can relate a situation like that. Another question was, tell us about a time when your work changed due to new methods. Again, if you don't have any experience in the healthcare field, just relate it to an experience you've had where you've made a bunch of change, whether it's been like a new school or maybe you moved to a new city or something like that. I was able to relate it to when my work changed an entire menu and went through a whole different renovation stage, and just basically keeping an open mind and being willing to learn new steps and knowing that, you know, one way isn't always the best way. There can be new ways that are gonna work just as good, if not better. And then let's see, they're gonna ask questions like, how do you work as a team and how do you work individually? And I think both of those are very important in nursing. And so just kind of reiterating that, like, you can work by yourself and you're very good at, you know, organizing your train of thought and doing everything by yourself, but you're also a team player and you're gonna help others when they need it. They asked also, give an example of a medical emergency and how you reacted. In nursing school, I never really seen a code to my patient personally, and I never been in a situation where there was an emergency. I remember at a time where my patient was having some troubles breathing and the steps that I did to kind of alleviate his stress and stuff like that. So just kind of going through a situation where maybe it's not exactly a medical emergency, but may turn into one. The last question I got was, your patient is having an issue with you, what do you do? This is another kind of like active listening, and if they're really being upset or something, de-escalating them and being able to talk it out in a sense to make them feel like they're being heard. So at the end of the interview, you want to ask questions as well. I think it's important to know the nurse ratio to patients. So it's important to know that. It's important to also know the difference between the ratios at night during the day, because if you work at night, I do believe that the nurses do get more patients than during the day. So just kind of having that like kind of in your head, so that way if you do work nights, you know that, oh wait, you told me there was only 4 patients per nurse, and then they're like, oh no, at night it's 6 or whatever it may be. Also, I asked how many more nurses do they need in order to be fully staffed on the floor. I think this is just a good question to kind of know, give or take, how many nurses are short, because how many nurses are short is gonna kind of play a role in how busy the floor is or how short the floor normally is. Other questions you can ask include like how many aides are on the floor, how many charge nurses are there, what other class. I don't really think any other questions. I think those were kind of the only questions I really had. I think I only had 3 questions. So I don't know, you can probably give or take how many you want to ask. Then after I was offered the positions, I did ask to have some time to think about it because they didn't really offer you a deadline to accept the position or not. They were kind of just like, oh, we offer you this and whatever. So then at the end, I was just like, okay, I would love to, think it over and kind of see what my options are. It took me a few days after my interview to get a call back saying that I was hired. I also, in the meantime, when I knew which jobs had offered me positions, I looked at glassdoor.com and I looked on there to see the reviews from actual employees, and I thought that really helped me out just so I can get more of an idea of what the floor was from another nurse's perspective, whether it was good or whether it was bad. I also just looked on Google in general and looked at the reviews people had of the hospital. I took that with a grain of salt just because, I don't know, I feel like some people kind of just do reviews based on anger or based on like a certain situation that really the nurse had nothing to do with. So sometimes those can be a little iffy, but I also used Reddit, and then I asked if anyone worked at these hospitals, what do they like about it, what do they dislike, and actually I got a pretty good amount of people to comment on mine. Some people said, oh, I like this hospital because they use Epic, or I don't like this hospital because the charting is very old school, or their stuff isn't up to date, or something like that. Then I kind of outweighed the differences in pay and differential. I don't know, but both of my hospitals paid the exact same, but I think it's just because of the place that I live. So that wasn't a big deal. Then I kind of saw which ones offered tuition reimbursement and which ones didn't, how much they offered and how often. This was important if anyone wants to continue their education. I do, so I just wanted to make sure that once I'm ready to get back into school, I was gonna be reimbursed for at least some of the costs that I would be paying out of pocket. And then I decided from there. Yeah, so I hope that was helpful to some of you guys who might be going through the interview process. I know how nerve-wracking it was to me, but I promise you it's not as nerve-wracking as you may think. Just go in with a good personality and a positive outlook. They already know you're a new nurse and they know you don't have experience, so it's like you don't really have anything to lose, and there's always going to be another opportunity if for some reason the opportunity you are currently faced with doesn't work out. So I hope this just kind of calms the nerve of some of you guys who might be going through this process, and I will see you guys in the next video.